Coming up, Tom Brady tries to break that losing streak against the Saints, and the Packers will try to avoid going 0-2 in their own division. This is Locked On Game to Game NFL.
Every game, every team, every angle. Locked On Game to Game, your team every day.
One of the most intriguing matchups this week is going to feature the Vikings and Eagles on Monday Night Football. The Vikings and Eagles both won in week one a little bit easier than the other, as the Eagles almost gave their game against the Lions away. Locked On Eagles has more on what Philly needs to do to change for week two.
For the Philadelphia Eagles to get a win on Monday night against the Minnesota Vikings, they need better overall trench play on both sides of the ball. I'm Louis DiBiase, host of the Locked On Eagles podcast. The Eagles got away with a nail-biting 38-35 win on Sunday against the Detroit Lions, but against Minnesota, they can't get away with their offensive line allowing Jalen Hurts to be pressured 38% of the time and taking 20 hits, which led all quarterbacks week one when it comes to quarterback contact. And the defensive line could not get to Jared Goff. The four-man pass rush was really not great. This team has invested $44 million on the defensive line. They have stars on both sides of the ball in the trenches. It's supposed to be the two strongest position groups for this team. They need to be better and make sure Kirk Cousins is not clean and make sure that Jalen can stand in the pocket and deliver throws to A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert. I'm Louis DiBiase. This is Locked On Eagles.
The Packers are looking to get their first divisional win when they take on the Bears on Sunday. In fact, they're trying to get their first win at all. The Bears looked impressive as they took down the 49ers in the rain, while the Packers did not show up in Minnesota. Locked On Packers and Locked On Bears break down what it's going to take to win in week two.
Don't give up the big play. I'm Peter Bukowski, host of Locked On Packers, and the coverage busts. That was the problem for the Packers in week one against the Minnesota Vikings. Yes, there were offensive issues for Green Bay, but they turned the ball over twice in the red zone on downs, including a 4th and goal from the 1. They dropped a 75-yard would-be walk-in touchdown. I'm not worried about the offense because guess what? Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback. But on defense, if they don't give the Bears easy opportunities to score, easy opportunities like letting Justin Fields escape the pocket and throw to a receiver wide open like Dante Pettis was on the touchdown he scored last weekend, then it's going to be tough for the Bears to score enough to win in this game. Play disciplined football. Play your umbrella coverages, your two deep zones, but play them with discipline and you win on Sunday night.
The Chicago Bears need to be more consistent at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball if they want to beat the Green Bay Packers on Sunday night. I'm Lauren Cox, host of the Locked On Bears podcast, and we saw the Chicago Bears struggle in the trenches even in the win against the San Francisco 49ers. The Bears could not run the ball as effectively as they would have liked to. They wanted to get more of a pass rush going as well, struggling to stop the run at times against Elijah Mitchell and Deebo Samuel in the backfield. They're taking on a Green Bay Packers team that ran the ball very well last week with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, one of the few things Green Bay could actually do well offensively. The Packers have a couple of injuries at the offensive tackle positions. We'll see what they get back in terms of health-wise, but there's an opportunity for the Bears defense to step up the pass rush a little bit more and make Aaron Rodgers uncomfortable and try and slow down that running game much better than they could in week one against the San Francisco 49ers. Combine that with a little bit better pass protection for Justin Fields and maybe more of a ground game and winning up front there, and that's how the Bears can put together a second straight upset, this time on the road in Green Bay. For more daily Chicago Bears news and analysis, check out the Locked On Bears podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
The Bengals lost a heartbreaker in overtime to the Steelers in week one and will no doubt come out with something to prove this week in Dallas. Locked On Cowboys details all of the things that the Dallas defense is going to need to come out and do to be victorious on Sunday.
Micah Parsons and the Dallas Cowboys defense needs to play out of their minds if they want to beat the Cincinnati Bengals this Sunday. Hi, I'm Landon McCool at the Locked On Cowboys podcast, and after losing Dak Prescott for what appears to be at least a month, if not two, the Dallas Cowboys are going to be without their leader and quarterback for these next few games, and especially against a team that played in the Super Bowl last year. They are going to need their defense to play incredible in order to give the opportunity for Cooper Rush and the rest of the offense to get anything on the board. After struggling last week to do anything, even with Dak on the field, this is going to be a real test to see how the Cowboys offense can bounce back from what was maybe the worst Cowboys performance in a very long while. On the good side of that is that we did see Micah Parsons and this defense play well at times. Parsons with 2 key sacks, and he's going to need to do more of that this weekend against Joe Burrow if they want to have any opportunity to win this game. For more on your Dallas Cowboys and this weekend's big matchup, make sure you check out the Locked On Cowboys podcast every Monday through Friday, free and available wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Raiders made the playoffs last season, but started off this year with a loss. So did the Cardinals, who will visit Vegas for an important Week 2 battle on Sunday. Only 12% of 0-2 teams make the playoffs, so Locked On Cardinals has to make sure that Arizona wins to get itself back on track.
The Arizona Cardinals need to implement an offensive game plan that works if they want to win on Sunday in Las Vegas. I'm Alex Clancy, host of Locked On Arizona Cardinals. In Week 1, the Arizona Cardinals offense failed the defense. This offseason, the Arizona Cardinals and Steve Keim made it obvious that they were going to load up on offensive firepower in an effort to make the Arizona Cardinals offense the strength of this team. That left the defense kind of looking around like, well, what about us? And we saw them get exposed on Sunday against Kansas City. Could have been Patrick Mahomes, could have been Rust, could have been Vance Joseph trying to figure out how to utilize his new personnel. Regardless, come Sunday, Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray need to put together a game plan to put up a lot of points because there should be a lot of points scored. And if the Cardinals don't score early, like they didn't do in Kansas City, we could see a repeat performance in Week 2 that we saw in Week 1. Here's hoping to that not happening on Sunday in Vegas. For more Arizona Cardinals news and this weekend's big matchup, be sure to check out Locked On Cardinals podcast every Monday through Friday, free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Coming up, we'll have more previews of the Week 2 action in the NFL. This is Locked On Game to Game NFL. This edition of Locked On Game to Game NFL is brought to you by Turo, the world's largest car sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car you want, wherever you want, from a community of local hosts across the U.S., Canada, and in the UK. Ditch boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo.com. The Bucs looked pretty rusty in Week 1, but Tom Brady and company still walked out of Dallas with a win. Week 2 is not going to be that simple, as Tom Brady and Tampa have struggled mightily against New Orleans. Locked On Bucs breaks down how the team can improve from last week's matchup.
James Yarko here from the Locked On Bucs podcast, talking about the Buccaneers' keys to victory this week against the New Orleans Saints. And it's going to be very similar to what we saw in Week 1 against the Dallas Cowboys. And that is a commitment to the run game. Even though it's only been 1 week, the Buccaneers are 8th in the NFL in rushing, while the Saints are 29th in run defense, having given up over 200 rushing yards to the Atlanta Falcons a week ago. To control the ball, control the clock, control the tempo with a duo of Leonard Fournette and Rachaad White will help the Buccaneers contain what is a very loud and rambunctious crowd in New Orleans, keep the crowd noise down, be able to minimize risk, and hopefully control the game from the jump. For more on this story and all things Tampa Bay Buccaneers, make sure you join my co-host David Harrison and I 5 days a week on the Locked On Bucs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Giants and Panthers will face off in Week 2. Locked On Panthers and Locked On Giants weigh in on what it's going to take for their team to improve to 2-0.
The Carolina Panthers must stop the run if they're going to beat the New York Giants on Sunday. I'm Julian Council, host of the Locked On Panthers podcast. The Carolina Panthers gave up 217 yards on the ground last week in their Week 1 loss to the Cleveland Browns. The only other team they gave up more were the Tennessee Titans, who were their opponents. The New York Giants, who the Carolina Panthers will face on Sunday, who ran for 238 yards. Saquon Barkley looked like the rookie version of himself. And the Carolina Panthers, who had hoped, Matt Rule, the head coach there, had hoped that they could lean on their defense starting the year while the offense started to catch up. Well, that was not the case week one. If the Panthers want to avoid an 0-2 start, they're going to have to be tougher against the run and stop Saquon Barkley, Daniel Jones, and that Giants rushing attack. For more on the Carolina Panthers and this weekend's big matchup, be sure to check out the Locked On Panthers podcast every Monday through Friday, free and available wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The New York Giants managed to hold Tennessee Titans running back Derrick Henry to just 82 rushing yards on 21 carries last week. But don't expect the Giants to exhale after handling that big challenge, because they have yet another one on deck when they host the Carolina Panthers this weekend at MetLife Stadium. Hi, everybody. Patricia Traina reporting. And this weekend, the New York Giants open their 2022 regular season home slate against the Carolina Panthers team that's coming off of a narrow 26-24 loss to the Cleveland Browns last week. For the Giants, one of, if not their biggest challenges, will be figuring out how to stop Panthers running back Christian McCaffrey, who, whether it's the run or the pass, is dangerous with the ball in his hands. While the Giants' run defensive plan against McCaffrey could have similarities to what they did last week against Henry, the real challenge for the Giants is going to be in covering McCaffrey. As last week showed, the Giants' inside linebackers really struggled in coverage against the Titans, allowing both Tennessee Titans passing touchdowns in the game. Tay Crowder finished with a team-worst 158.3 coverage rating, and fellow starter Austin Calitro was second with a 142.4 coverage rating. Figuring out how to mask the pass coverage deficiencies of the linebackers is no doubt high atop of defensive coordinator Wink Martindale's to-do list this week. If the Giants can find a way to corral McCaffrey, then there's no reason why the joy in the land of the Giants won't continue this weekend. If they can't, well, let's hope that the landing back down to earth isn't too bumpy. For more on the New York Giants, be sure to keep it here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
And for the first time in a long time, the Lions are favored to win a football game. I guess that Hard Knocks charm is really spreading and everybody's feeling the love. Carson Wentz and the Commanders are going to do their best to make sure that does not happen. Locked On Lions and Locked On Commanders preview Sunday's game.
The Detroit Lions must stick with the run game in order to knock off the Washington Commanders on Sunday. I'm Matt Derry, host of the Locked On Lions podcast. Big key for this Sunday's game, certainly for the Lions, is getting DeAndre Swift the football and especially establishing that ground game and sticking with it. Last week, we saw it from DeAndre. 15 carries, over 140 yards, and a dominant performance against the Philadelphia Eagles. Swift suffering from a little bit of an ankle injury, but going up against a Washington defense that last week struggled, giving up on over 100 yards to the Jacksonville Jaguars on the ground. Sticking with the ground game, DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams are running the football and really just staying with it is what's going to get the Lions over the hump, and I think score some points against the Commanders team and get a win. For more on your Detroit Lions in this weekend's big matchup, be sure to check out the Locked On Lions podcast every Monday through Friday, free and available wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey everybody, it's Chris Russell here from the Locked On Commanders podcast. So the 1-0 Commanders head to the Detroit Lions, Ford Field, 0-1. It's been a little bit of a house of horrors over the years for the Washington organization. That's number one. Don't take the Detroit Lions lightly, even with the Lions favored by a point and a half, depending on where you get it. You should not in any way, shape, or form think that this is the same old Lions, because they will hurt you. How does Washington win this game? My keys to victory: 1, get an early lead. Start fast, start quick. Put Detroit behind, even though they made a comeback against Philadelphia. 2, you cannot have 3 turnovers. 1 turnover, fine. 2 turnovers, maybe. Can't get away with 3 turnovers every week like they had last week, and play good on special teams, which they did, surprisingly, last week as well. For the full-length Locked On Commanders podcast, check out David Harrison and myself on, again, the Locked On Commanders podcast. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day.
That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Game to Game NFL. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. Make sure you go subscribe to your team's Locked On podcast and also subscribe and follow Locked On NFL on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Kanani Stevens. This has been Locked On Game to Game.